That afternoon, I came home and found my husband in the bathtub with his mistress, making fun of my body. And what I did when I closed that door would change the lives of two marriages forever. I'm Claire, and I had been married to Julian for 10 years. That morning, he kissed me goodbye, saying he had an important meeting and would be working late. I trusted him, or at least I thought I did, until a splitting headache made me leave the office on my lunch break to head back to our suburban home. Walking through the front door, I noticed a strange silence, broken only by the sound of running water and laughter, echoing from the master bathroom. I walked down the hallway, my heart pounding. The heavy oak door was ajar, steam billowing out into the bedroom. I pushed it open gently, and what I saw knocked the wind out of me. Julian was submerged in a bubble bath with a blonde woman. But the worst part wasn't seeing them together. The worst part was what I heard right before they noticed me. The woman asked him, "Don't you feel bad for Claire?" And Julian, my husband, the man I had given my best years and 2 children to, laughed cruelly and replied, "For her? Not at all. Her body disgusts me. It's full of stretch marks and sagging skin. You, on the other hand, are perfect." Those words hurt more than a physical blow. In that exact second, love calcified into pure hatred. They hadn't seen me yet. They were too busy laughing at my expense. With an ice-cold calm, I took a step back, grabbed the handle of the solid oak door, slammed it shut, and turned the deadbolt from the outside. The screaming started instantly. "Claire, open up! Are you crazy?" Julian pounded on the door, naked, wet, and trapped. But I wasn't going to open it. I had a much better plan. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a very specific contact, Robert, Lauren's husband. I dialed the number, and when he picked up, I said with a steady voice, "Robert, get to my house right now. There's something in my bathtub that you need to see with your own eyes." But before I tell you what happened when Robert arrived 15 minutes later and found his wife naked and trapped with my husband, I ask that you leave a comment telling us what state or city you're watching from, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Because what happened in that bathroom was the very definition of divine justice. The hallway of my house, that afternoon of steam and lies, turned into the waiting room of hell for 2 traitors. I stood there motionless, my back pressed against the cold wood of the locked door, feeling the vibrations of Julian's fists echoing down my spine. My breathing was heavy, but strangely, my hands weren't shaking. They held onto that phone as if it were the detonator to a bomb I had just armed. Inside the bathroom, chaos had replaced the obscene laughter from just moments before. I could hear the frantic splashing of water, like 2 panicked animals trying to claw their way out of a slippery trap. "Claire, open this door right now," Julian roared. His voice had lost that seductive, mocking tone he'd used to humiliate me. Now it was the voice of a wounded alpha male, a man used to calling the shots who couldn't comprehend how his obedient, sagging wife dared to defy him. "Claire, this isn't funny. Lauren is getting nervous," he yelled again. Lauren. He didn't even have the decency to hide her name. Lauren, my next-door neighbor. Lauren, the woman who waved at me at Whole Foods and asked how my kids were doing in school. Lauren, the wife of Robert, a hard-working, honest mechanic who didn't deserve any of this. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The scent of bath salts, my expensive lavender bath salts, the ones I saved for special occasions, and that they had used without permission, seeped from under the door. It smelled like lavender mixed with the dirtiest kind of betrayal. "Disgusts," I whispered to myself, testing the word on my tongue. "My body disgusts you, Julian." I looked down at my stomach. Through the fabric of my blouse, I could feel the marks of life. Yes, I had stretch marks. I had scars. Every one of those silver lines on my skin was a roadmap of motherhood. They were the marks left behind after carrying Sophie and Matthew in my womb, our children, the kids he claimed to adore. I remembered the sleepless nights, the feverish toddlers, the chronic exhaustion that settles deep into a mother's bones. I remembered how my body had expanded to give life, how it had transformed. And he, the man who had been there, who had held my hand in the delivery room, now dared to use that sacrifice as an insult to please a younger woman. A woman who had sacrificed absolutely nothing for him. A wave of heat rose in my chest, but it wasn't shame anymore. It was a cold, calculated, ancient wrath. "Robert is on his way," I said loudly, making sure my voice cut clearly through the solid wood. The silence that followed on the other side of the door was absolute. The splashing stopped dead. "What did you say?" Lauren's voice squeaked out, trembling and high-pitched. It was the first time she had spoken since I turned the lock. She no longer sounded like the femme fatale laughing at my stretch marks. She sounded exactly like what she was, a trapped coward. I said I called your husband, Lauren, I repeated, savoring every syllable. I told him to come over. That there's an emergency. That he needs to see what's happening in my bathroom. I heard a muffled gasp, and the sound of someone slipping in the tub. No, Claire, you can't do that, Julian shouted, slamming his weight against the door. Robert will kill her. He's a hothead. You have to open the door. Let's talk, please, honey. Let's just talk. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Honey? A minute ago, I was the woman who disgusted you. The woman with the stretch marks. Now I'm your honey because you're terrified. I checked my Apple Watch. Robert managed an auto repair shop just 10 minutes away from our subdivision. If he drove fast, and I knew he would after my call, he would arrive any second. I had 10, maybe 12 minutes to torture them with their own anxiety before Judgment Day arrived. I stepped away from the door and walked to the kitchen. I needed water. My lips were dry. As I filled a glass, I looked at the photos pinned to the fridge. A picture from our last anniversary. Julian was smiling, his arm wrapped around me. I looked happy. How blind I had been. How stupid. There were signs. Of course there were. The late nights at the office, the scent of perfume that wasn't mine, which he brushed off as a coworker's. His iPhone always placed face down on the counter. But a woman in love, a dedicated mom, sometimes chooses not to see things to keep the peace, to protect the kids. But that comment, her body disgusts me, that tore the veil. That destroyed any possibility of forgiveness. It wasn't just sexual infidelity. It was contempt. Contempt for my essence, my history, my dignity. I drank the water in one gulp and walked back to the hallway. The whispers inside the bathroom were frantic. Get dressed. Put something on. Anything. Julian hissed. I don't have my clothes. I left them in the bedroom. Lauren whimpered. Oh my God, Robert is going to kill me. Julian, do something. Try to open it. It's deadbolted. I can't. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. Don't bother trying, I yelled to them. It's a heavy-duty security lock. We installed it last year, remember, Julian? You said it was so the kids couldn't barge in while we were showering. How ironic. Now it's keeping you from getting out. Claire, listen to me. Julian's voice tried to sound reasonable, though the panic was vibrating in his throat. I know you're hurt, and you have every right to be. I was an idiot. What I said. It was just guy talk, you know? Locker room talk. I didn't mean it. You're the mother of my kids. Open the door, let Lauren get dressed and leave. We'll fix this, just us. I promise I'll make it up to you. I'll buy us that Hawaiian vacation you wanted. Just don't drag Robert into this. He has nothing to do with it. Guy talk, I repeated, feeling the bile rise in my throat. Humiliating your wife is guy talk. Laughing at my body while you screw my neighbor is guy talk. I messed up. I'm sorry, he yelled. But think about the kids, Claire. If Robert comes, it'll be a huge scandal. The whole neighborhood will know. The PTA will talk. The kids will suffer. That was his biggest mistake, bringing up the kids. Julian always used the kids as a human shield when he screwed up. If he blew our savings on stupid gadgets, it was for the kids to enjoy. If he didn't help around the house, it was because he was working hard for the kids. And now, he wanted to use their well-being to save his own skin. You're right, I said softly. The kids shouldn't see this. Luckily, they're in after-school care until 5. We have 2 hours. Plenty of time for Robert to arrive, to see who his wife really is, to see who his buddy and neighbor really is. And plenty of time for me to pack your bags, right? Claire, please. Lauren started banging on the door too. Claire, we're both women. Have some mercy. Robert is incredibly jealous. He might do something crazy. Do you want that on your conscience? Mercy? I asked the empty hallway. Did you have mercy when you came into my house? Into my bathroom? Into my bed? Did you have mercy when you laughed hearing that my body disgusted him? No, Lauren. The mercy ran out the second I turned this lock. The rumble of an engine approaching the driveway made me look toward the living room window. I knew that sound. It was Robert's Ford F-150. The engine roared. He had driven fast. My stomach did a flip. The moment of truth was here. Julian? Lauren? I said, stepping close to the door, whispering against the wood. Brace yourselves. Robert just parked. I backed away just as the truck's engine was killed abruptly in the driveway. I heard a heavy truck door slam shut, a sharp, loud sound that echoed in the quiet suburban afternoon. The panic inside the bathroom skyrocketed. He's here! Claire, tell him to go away, Julian begged, his voice stripped of all dignity. I ignored him. I watched through the peephole of the front door. Robert, usually a big, jovial guy, looked pale and agitated. He jogged up the porch steps, and I opened the door right before he could knock. Claire, you said it was an emergency. What the hell? He stopped short when he saw me. My eyes, brimming with held-back tears and an unnatural calmness, must have told him that something catastrophic had happened. Robert, thank you for coming so quickly, I said. My voice sounded professional, detached. I gestured for him to come in. He stepped inside, looking around the house, confused by the silence. Where's Lauren? What happened? Are the kids okay? The kids are fine, Robert. They're safe from the poison in this house, I replied without flinching. And Lauren. Lauren is exactly where she deserves to be. Follow me. I walked slowly down the hallway, keeping my eyes on him. Every step felt like a judge's gavel dropping. He followed, the anxiety palpable on his face. When we reached the master bathroom door, the tension in the air was electric. Robert, behind this door, I pointed at the wood, is your wife Lauren and my husband Julian. Robert blinked. It took his brain a second to process the words. At first, he almost looked relieved. They're here? Why are they locked in? Is this some kind of joke? Why was there screaming? In that exact moment, Lauren and Julian must have heard Robert's voice through the door, and all hell broke loose. They started screaming and pounding on the door with all their might. But these were screams of pure terror, not anger. Robert, no, go away! Claire is crazy. Open the door, Claire, please, Lauren shrieked, choking on her tears. Robert froze. The color drained from his face as confusion warped into horrifying realization. His breathing turned ragged, and when he looked at me, his eyes were two deep wells of agony. Claire, tell me this isn't what I think it is. His voice was a fragile thread, more heartbreaking than any scream. I stepped closer to the door and spoke with a coldness I didn't know I possessed. Ask them yourself, Robert. Right after Julian told her that my body, the body that gave him 2 children, disgusts him because of my stretch marks. He told her that hers, on the other hand, is perfect. Robert dropped to his knees on the hardwood floor, as if an invisible wrecking ball had hit him in the chest. He was no longer the strong, broad-shouldered mechanic. He was a broken, betrayed, humiliated husband. He raised a shaking hand and placed it flat against the locked door. Julian. Lauren. He whispered. This time, the silence inside was absolute. Tell him the truth, Julian, I ordered, banging my fist on the door. Tell Robert how you laughed at me. Tell him how much you enjoyed having his wife in my tub. Lauren let out a gut-wrenching sob. Julian, his voice thick with shame and fear, finally spoke. Robert. Man, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. A slip-up. Please forgive me. It's not what it looks like. It is exactly what it looks like, you miserable coward, I yelled, putting my face near the door gap. I told you Robert was coming. I told you your trial was about to begin. Robert didn't scream. He didn't curse. He stood up with a slowness that chilled my blood. He looked at the door, then looked at me, then stared blankly down the hallway. Pure, unadulterated rage, the deepest kind of pain, and profound humiliation swirled in his eyes. He realized he hadn't just been robbed of his marriage, he had been mocked. His wife's body had been compared to mine to degrade me in a sick, twisted game between 2 cheaters. That instant when Robert, a genuinely good man, grasped the sheer magnitude of the mockery was my first bitter victory. The traitors inside knew their fate no longer rested in my hands, but in the silent fury of the giant standing on the other side of the wood. Robert stood in silence for a few more seconds. Seconds that felt like hours. Inside the bathroom, the silence was equally heavy, broken only by a dripping faucet. It felt like even the water was holding its breath. Finally, Robert spoke. His voice wasn't a yell, it was much worse. It was a dead, hollow sound, devoid of any hope. Lauren, he said, tasting her name like ash in his mouth. How long? There was a muffled gasp on the other side. Robert, please, let's not do this here. Let us out. I'm freezing. I don't have clothes. Please. Honey, do not call me honey, Robert roared, slamming his open palm against the door. The boom made Lauren scream in terror. I asked you how long you've been laughing at me with this piece of trash. A few months, she whispered so quietly we could barely hear it. A few months, Robert repeated, and I watched the tears finally spill over his weathered cheeks. A few months. While I was pulling double shifts at the garage to pay for our daughter's braces, while I was coming home with grease permanently stained into my hands, kissing your forehead, thinking you were the best woman in the world, you were over here in my neighbor's bathtub, making fun of Claire, making fun of me. We weren't making fun of you, Robert, I swear. Julian chimed in, trying to play peacemaker. A fatal error. It was just, a physical thing. It had nothing to do with respect. Respect? I let out a bark of disbelief. You're talking about respect? The man who 10 minutes ago said my body disgusted him? Who called the stretch marks from his own kids repulsive? Robert turned to me. His eyes were bloodshot, but there was a sudden, crystal clarity in them. He looked me up and down, not with desire, but with profound recognition. He saw a wounded but dignified woman. He saw his partner in grief. Claire, he said softly, ignoring the renewed pleading coming from the bathroom. Do you have the key? I nodded, pulling it out of my jeans pocket and holding it up. The brass gleamed coldly under the hallway lights. Don't open it, he said firmly. What? Julian yelled from inside. Robert, you can't leave us in here. This is false imprisonment. I'll call the cops. I'll press charges. Press charges, Robert shot back, stepping right up to the door, speaking directly into the wood. Call 911. Julian, do it. I would love for the cops to show up. I would love to see them drag you out of there, buck naked, soaking wet, and pathetic. I would love for the entire subdivision to watch the squad cars haul you away. A terrifying silence fell over the bathroom. They knew Robert was right. The public shame would destroy them. Don't unlock it yet, Claire, Robert repeated, pulling out his own cell phone. Lauren says she's cold. She says she wants to come out, but I think this party is missing some guests. If they had the nerve to desecrate your home and your marriage, I think they deserve a full audience. Who are you calling? Lauren asked, true panic lacing her voice. Your parents, Lauren, Robert said with glacial calm as he dialed. They live 2 streets over. They always told me to take good care of you, that I was a good son-in-law. I think they deserve to know why their daughter is moving back into her childhood bedroom tonight. No, Robert, no. My dad has a heart condition. You'll kill him, Lauren shrieked, banging wildly against the door. You should have thought about your dad's heart before you climbed into another woman's bathtub, he replied, lifting the phone to his ear. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of an alliance between us. A bond forged in the fire of betrayal. He wasn't going to break the door down. He was going to dismantle their lives piece by piece, with the exact same coldness they had used to break ours. Arthur? Yes, it's Robert. Sorry to call in the middle of the day. No, we're physically fine. I need you and Eleanor to come over to Julian and Claire's house immediately. Yes, it's an emergency. It's about Lauren. No, she's not hurt, at least not on the outside. Just come over, please. He hung up and looked at me. They're on their way. I leaned against the wall, feeling a cocktail of exhaustion and adrenaline. The next few minutes were going to be the longest of Julian and Lauren's lives. They were trapped, naked, and their judges were multiplying. But then Julian tried one last play, a move that showed exactly how low a cornered rat could sink. Robert, man, listen to me. You have to understand something before this blows up, Julian said. His voice had shifted. The panic was gone, replaced by a slimy, conspiratorial tone. I didn't want this. Seriously, you have to believe me. It was her. Lauren has been obsessed with me. The silence that followed was louder than a gunshot. Inside the bathroom, Lauren stopped sobbing instantly. Outside, Robert and I exchanged a look of absolute disgust. What the hell are you saying? Lauren whispered, her voice cracking with shock. It's the truth, Lauren, and you know it. Julian spoke rapidly, desperate to save himself, throwing his mistress straight to the wolves. Robert, she used to sneak over when Claire wasn't home. She texted me all hours of the night. She provoked me. I'm a guy, I have weaknesses, but she was the relentless one. She told me you bored her. She said you were just a grease monkey, and she needed a real man. I just fell into her trap. You lying piece of shit, Lauren screamed. We heard a loud smack against the tiles, like she had shoved or slapped him. You told me you loved me. You told me Claire was a frigid bitch and you didn't even touch her anymore. You promised you were going to leave her. Shut up, you crazy psycho, Julian roared back. I just told you what you wanted to hear so you'd leave me alone. Robert, I swear, she planned this whole bathtub thing. I crossed my arms, a dark, freezing satisfaction washing over me. I didn't even have to do anything. I didn't have to torture them. I just gave them time and a locked door, and they were tearing each other apart. They were showing their true colors. Julian, the coward who betrays his wife and then sells out his mistress to save his own skin. And Lauren, the malicious fool who actually believed a cheating married man's promises. Robert stepped up to the door, trembling with contained fury. Julian, he said. His voice a low gravel. Shut your mouth. Every word you say just makes me want to rip your head off more. You're not even man enough to own your mistakes. And you, Lauren, hearing you talk about me like that, mocking my trade, that hurts worse than the cheating. Right then, the doorbell rang. Ding dong. The chime was so cheerful, so overwhelmingly out of place in a house that had become an emotional war zone. They're here, Robert said, turning slightly pale. Is that my parents? Lauren asked, a thread of a voice cutting through the door. The sheer terror erased all her previous rage. Robert, don't let them in. My dad will kill me. His blood pressure. You should have thought about your dad's blood pressure before you got naked in my neighbor's house, Robert stated. He turned to me. Do you want to get the door, Claire, or should I? I'll get it, I said, smoothing out my blouse and wiping away a stray tear, not a tear of sadness, but of pure tension. This is my house. I'll welcome the guests. I walked to the foyer. My legs felt heavy, but my resolve was made of iron. I opened the front door. Standing on my porch were Arthur and Eleanor Brooks. They were an older, respectable suburban couple, the kind who went to church every Sunday and hosted neighborhood block parties. Arthur had a deep scowl of worry on his face. Eleanor was wringing a tissue in her hands. Good afternoon, Claire dear, Eleanor said, peering over my shoulder into the house. Robert called us. He sounded very strange. He said it was an emergency. Did something happen to the kids? Was there an accident? Please, come in, I said, stepping aside. I couldn't tell them the truth, right there on the welcome mat. They had to see it. They had to hear it. They stepped inside hesitantly. The house was dead silent, a deceitful silence. I led them down the hallway. When they saw Robert standing in front of the master bathroom door, fists clenched, eyes red, Eleanor let out a small gasp. Robert, what is going on, son? Arthur asked, stepping forward, his paternal instincts kicking in. Did something happen to Lauren? Is she in the bathroom? Is she sick? Robert looked at his in-laws. I saw the profound pity in his expression. He loved these people. But the truth was a knife that had to be driven deep to cut out the infection. She's in there, Arthur, Robert said, pointing to the door. Lauren? Eleanor called out, stepping closer. Honey, are you okay? Open the door. It's Mom and Dad. From inside, only a miserable sob answered her. But Julian, arrogant and stupid to the very bitter end, thought that maybe Lauren's parents could be his allies, that they could shame us into opening the door to avoid a scene. Mr. Brooks! Julian yelled from inside. Please, help us! Claire and Robert have lost their minds. They're holding us hostage. Tell them to open up. Arthur froze like a statue. He recognized that voice. It wasn't his son-in-law. It was the neighbor. Julian, the older man asked, utterly bewildered, looking from Robert to me. What is Julian doing in the bathroom with you, Lauren? Why is the door locked? Dad, go away! I don't want you to see me! Lauren wailed hysterically. It's not that she doesn't want you to see her, Arthur, Robert interrupted, his voice hollow. It's that she can't come out because she's buck naked in the bathtub with Julian. The sentence dropped like a cement block onto the elderly couple. Eleanor grabbed her chest and stumbled against the wall. Arthur's face went crimson, then purple. He looked at the door, then at me, desperate for me to say it was a sick joke. "Claire, tell me this is a lie," Eleanor pleaded. "I wish it were, Eleanor," I answered softly. "But I came home from work early and found them. They were making fun of me. And now we're all here to watch them walk out." What happened next shattered whatever microscopic shred of dignity remained behind that door. Arthur didn't have a heart attack, though his face was so red I genuinely feared he might. Instead, he had an attack of old-school, righteous fury, the fury of a father watching his family's name being dragged through the mud by his own daughter. He raised his walking cane and slammed it against the wooden door with a force that rattled the frame. "Come out of there right now, Lauren," he roared. His voice made Eleanor shrink back. "Come out here and look me in the eye and tell me this is a lie. Tell me I'm not listening to my daughter naked with the neighbor's husband." Inside, Lauren was practically hyperventilating. "Dad, go away. Please, don't look at me. Julian forced me. He tricked me." "That's a lie!" Julian shouted, losing his temper again. "She came after me. Mr. Brooks, your daughter is a—" "Shut your mouth!" Robert cut him off, taking a step toward the door, fists tightly coiled. "If you insult her again in front of me or her parents, I will kick this door off its hinges and drag you out by your hair. And believe me, you don't want me to do that." Eleanor leaned her forehead against the door, weeping. "Lauren, how could you? Robert is such a good man. Claire is your friend. What is wrong with you? We raised you better than this. We taught you values." "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry." It was the only thing Lauren could repeat. I took in the scene. The hallway of my suburban home had transformed into a theater of human misery. My in-laws weren't there, my kids weren't there. It was just us and the naked, ugly truth. I felt that it was enough. The punishment of the locked door had served its purpose. It had destroyed their alibis, their excuses, and their lies. Now, it was time for the visual humiliation. "Time's up," I announced. I pulled the key out of my pocket once more. Everyone turned to look at me. "Robert, Arthur, Eleanor, step back. The rats need to come out of the drain." Nobody protested. They stepped back, forming a gauntlet of judgment. Robert crossed his arms, his jaw set like stone. Arthur held onto his wife, who was weeping silently into a tissue. I slid the key into the deadbolt. The metallic click-clack echoed like a gunshot in the tense silence. I turned the handle and pushed the door open. A wave of hot, humid air rolled out, carrying the scent of my lavender bath salts and cold sweat. As the steam cleared, the image revealed to us was utterly pathetic. There was no glamour, no forbidden passion. Just two miserable people. Julian had awkwardly wrapped a tiny hand towel around his waist, far too small to cover his shame, the corner, with a vanity pale and shivering. Lauren was standing inside the drained bathtub, trying to cover her body with the plastic shower liner she had ripped off the rings. Her mascara was smeared down her cheeks, making her look like a sad clown. Seeing us, seeing her parents and her husband standing there, Lauren let out a guttural moan that turned my stomach. She covered her face with her hands. "Don't look at me, don't look at me," she shrieked. Julian tried to scrape together an ounce of dignity. He stood up slightly straighter, gripping the ridiculous hand towel. This has an explanation," he stammered, actively avoiding Robert's eyes. We were just talking." Arthur stepped forward, raising his cane. Julian instinctively flinched back, hitting the edge of the sink. "Talking naked with my daughter in another woman's bathtub? Shut up, before I crack your skull open right here." "Get out," Robert said. His voice was quiet, but it was scarier than Arthur's screaming. "Get out of there right now. Both of you." "Robert, my clothes." "I don't have clothes," Lauren sobbed. "Your clothes are in my bedroom," I interjected, pointing down the hall to the master suite. "Where you left them before you went into the bathroom. You'll have to walk down there to get them." In front of everyone, it was the longest walk of shame in history. Lauren, wrapped in a dripping plastic shower curtain, and Julian, holding a hand towel, had to step out of the bathroom, walk down the hall under the glaring, disgusted eyes of their families, and go into my bedroom to dress. Nobody said a word as they passed. The sound of their wet, bare feet slapping against the hardwood floor was the only noise. When the bedroom door clicked shut behind them, I turned to Robert. "Now what?" I asked him. Robert looked at me. "Now comes the legal part, Claire. But before that, there's one more thing I need them to see. While we waited in the living room for them to finish getting dressed, the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Arthur sat on my sofa, his head in his hands, muttering curses under his breath. Eleanor cried softly, dabbing her eyes. Robert stood by the front window, staring out at the street as if looking for answers in the asphalt. I stood perfectly still in the center of the room, feeling strangely powerful. The woman who had walked into this house crying an hour ago no longer existed. Now, there was only a judge. Finally, the bedroom door opened. Julian and Lauren walked out. They were no longer naked, but they looked more exposed than ever. Lauren was wearing the sundress she had discarded on my floor, wrinkled and buttoned wrong. Julian had thrown on his jeans and put his t-shirt on inside out, a dead giveaway of his frantic panic. They couldn't even lift their eyes off the floor. "All right," Robert said, turning around slowly. His voice was completely devoid of emotion. "You're dressed. Now get out." Lauren looked up, her eyes puffy. "Robert, where am I supposed to go?" "That's our house. I have the kids." "Do not mention the kids," Robert exploded. For the first time, I saw the raw violence flex in his fists. "Don't you dare put my kids' names in your dirty mouth. That house is no longer yours. I called my sister while you were getting dressed. She's heading over there now to stay with the kids. You are not setting foot on that property tonight." Lauren turned to her parents, desperate for a lifeline. "Mom, Dad, you can't let him throw me out on the street. Robert is kicking me out." Arthur stood up with immense difficulty, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked at his daughter with a mix of infinite pain and disappointment. "You are coming with us, Lauren, but don't think you're coming home to rest. You're coming home so your mother and I can decide what to do with the absolute disgrace you've brought upon this family. Let's go." Lauren let out a whimper and shuffled toward her parents, head hung low. As she walked past me, she whispered an "I'm sorry" that the wind carried away. I didn't respond. She wasn't worth the oxygen it would take to speak. When the front door closed behind them, leaving the house in sudden quiet, Julian let out a massive sigh, as if a boulder had been lifted off his chest. He ran a hand through his hair and looked at me, attempting to dial up that arrogant charm he always used to manipulate me. "Well," he breathed out. "They're gone. That was a nightmare, but it's over. Claire, the show is over. Now that we're alone, let's just calm down." He walked toward the kitchen. "Do you want a glass of water? You look pale." I stared at him, utterly incredulous. He genuinely thought that after all of this, we were just going to drink a glass of water and eat dinner like nothing happened. "I don't want water, Julian," I said, my voice sharp as broken glass. "I want you to take that same suitcase you packed for your important meeting this morning, pack the rest of your clothes, and get the hell out of my house." Julian stopped in his tracks and let out a nervous chuckle. "What?" "Claire, stop being dramatic. I know you're mad, and you have a right to be. But this is my house. My name is on the mortgage. You can't just kick me out." "Your house?" I took a step toward him. "The house where you brought your mistress? The house where you mocked my body? You lost the right to call this a home the second you put that woman in our bathtub." "I'm not leaving, Claire," he said, his tone hardening as he crossed his arms. His face morphed back into the cruel man from the bathroom. "You can yell, you can cry, but I'm not moving. I have rights. And if you try to kick me out, I'll tell the judge you're a hysterical woman who locked me in a bathroom against my will. Let's see who they believe." I smiled. It was the smile of a wolf watching a rabbit step into a snare. "Oh, really? You want to talk about false imprisonment?" I pulled my iPhone out of my pocket and tapped the screen. "Go ahead, Julian. But before you do, you might want to know that I didn't just call Robert. I recorded everything. I have crystal clear audio from the second I locked the door. I have your voice, loud and clear, saying my body disgusts you and confessing that you've been sleeping with Lauren for months. And I have a video of you two doing the walk of shame in front of her parents." All the blood drained from Julian's face. He went as white as a sheet of paper. "If you are not out of this house in 5 minutes," I continued, stepping into his personal space until I could smell his fear. "This video won't just go to a judge. It goes to the PTA Facebook group. It goes directly to your boss's email. It goes to every single one of your LinkedIn connections and Facebook friends. You decide, Julian. Do you leave quietly and keep a tiny shred of your reputation? Or do you stay and let me make you the most hated man in this town before the sun goes down?" Julian looked into my eyes and knew he had lost. He knew that look. It was the same look I had when one of our kids was sick and I stayed up for 3 nights straight without yielding to exhaustion. He knew that when I made a firm decision, there was no going back. And more importantly, he knew I would execute my threat to nuke his public image without a second's hesitation. He didn't say another word. The arrogance evaporated, revealing the small, cowardly man underneath. He dropped his head, walked into the bedroom, and in less than 5 minutes, walked out dragging a haphazardly packed suitcase, shirt sleeves hanging out the zipper. When he reached the front door, he stopped and turned. For a split second, I thought he might actually apologize. But his ego was too massive. "You're going to regret this, Claire," he spat with pure venom. "You can't make it on your own. The mortgage, the kids, the upkeep. You're going to drown without me. And when you come crawling back begging for help, I won't be here. Don't worry about me," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. "I'd rather drown in my dignity than float in your lies. And as for the kids, I'll tell them Daddy went on a very long business trip. Leave your keys on the console." He threw his keyring onto the entryway table with a violent clatter that marked the official end of a 10-year marriage. He walked out and slammed the door so hard the picture frames rattled on the walls. I stood there, staring at the closed door. I listened as his car engine started and backed out of the driveway. Only then, when absolute silence reclaimed the house, did my legs finally give out. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the hardwood floor. I pulled my knees to my chest, and for the first time that entire afternoon, I let myself cry. But it wasn't a long cry. I cried for exactly 5 minutes. 5 minutes for the man I thought he was. 5 minutes for the family we had broken. And then, I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. I didn't have time for a pity party. I had to clean my house. I stood up and marched straight into the master bathroom. The smell was still there, that sickly sweet, nauseating scent of betrayal. The tub was drained, but dried soap scum clung to the edges, and wet towels were bunched on the floor. I felt a wave of disgust, but not toward myself. Toward the filth they had left in my sanctuary. I grabbed heavy rubber gloves, the strongest bleach I owned, and a stiff bristled scrub brush. I walked into that bathroom like a soldier walking onto a battlefield. I scrubbed. I scrubbed every square inch of that tub. I scrubbed the tiles, the floor, the vanity. I used so much bleach the chemical fumes made my eyes water. But it was necessary. I needed to burn away every trace of them. I needed to purify my home. I took the towels they used and threw them straight into the garbage can. I wasn't going to wash them. I didn't want a single thread that had touched Lauren's skin to ever touch mine or my kids again. I ripped down the plastic shower liner and shoved it into a black trash bag. When I was done, the bathroom sparkled. It smelled like bleach, clean, and clinical. I peeled off the gloves and splashed cold water on my face. Then, I looked up and stared at myself in the large vanity mirror, the same mirror where I had picked apart my flaws so many times. I looked at my dark circles, my messy hair. Then I looked down at my body. I pulled up my blouse. There they were, the stretch marks on my stomach. The silver lines Julian had despised. I ran my fingers over them. I felt no shame anymore. They were the marks of life. They were proof that my body was capable of creating miracles, of stretching and enduring. Julian's body had no marks, but his soul was rotting. My body had scars, but my soul was intact. "My body does not disgust me," I said out loud to my reflection, finding my voice again. "My body is strong. And starting today, it belongs only to me." That night, I slept on the living room couch. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the master bed just yet. But I slept deeply. No snoring beside me. No lies hovering in the air. I slept with the peace of knowing the worst was over. But what I didn't know was that the next morning, the real legal and financial war was about to begin, and Robert was going to play a key role in my rebirth. The next morning, the sun blasted through the living room window with a brilliant insolence, as if it didn't know my world had ended the night before. I woke up on the couch with a stiff neck, but with a strange feeling of lightness in my chest. For the first time in months, I didn't wake up with that knot in my stomach, that female intuition screaming that something was wrong. The bomb had dropped, and even though there was collateral damage, The truth was infinitely lighter than a lie. The hardest part was the morning theater routine. I woke up Sophie and Matthew with tickles and kisses, swallowing my tears. "Where's Dad?" Matthew asked, rubbing his chubby little eyes. "Daddy had to go on a trip really early, sweetie." I lied, hating myself for it but knowing it was necessary. An emergency work trip. He'll be gone for a little while. The kids, in their blessed innocence, just shrugged and asked for Cheerios. I drove them to school, kissed their foreheads at the drop-off line, and as I watched them walk through the school doors, I felt my armor lock into place. From now on, everything I did was for them. I wasn't going to let Julian ruin their future. When I pulled back into my driveway, I saw Robert's F-150 parked in front of my house. He was leaning against the hood, holding a Yeti thermos of coffee. Deep, dark bags hung under his eyes. He looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. When he saw me, he tried to smile, but it was just a painful grimace. "Coffee?" he offered, lifting a second cup he had sitting on the hood. "God, yes," I answered. "Come inside." We sat down at the kitchen island, the same island where the four of us had shared takeout so many times as good neighbors. Now, Julian's stool and Lauren's imaginary stool sat empty like open graves. "Lauren's at her parents' house," Robert said, breaking the silence after a long sip. His voice was gravelly. "Arthur won't even let her go to the corner store. He took her phone. Says she's a disgrace to the family name. Last night she spent hours screaming that Julian promised he was going to divorce you. That he promised her a life of luxury." "Luxury?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Julian doesn't even know how to run the dishwasher. What luxury was he going to give her?" Robert reached into his Carhartt jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He set it on the granite counter and slid it toward me. "That's what I thought, Claire. But before I came over here this morning, I went to the bank. We have joint accounts. Or had." He tapped the envelope. "Open it." I opened it with trembling hands. They were bank statements. As my eyes scanned the columns, I felt my blood hit a boiling point. High-end hotels, dinners at expensive downtown steakhouses that Julian claimed we couldn't afford because we needed to budget, jewelry store purchases, and the absolute worst, a wire transfer from 3 days ago for $5,000. "What is this?" I asked, pointing to the massive withdrawal. "That's the money we had saved in our daughter's 529 college plan," Robert said, his eyes welling up with furious tears. "Lauren drained it. She wired it to your husband. Apparently, your husband had a massive gambling debt or some busted crypto investment he was hiding from you. My wife stole from my daughter's college fund to pay for your husband's screw-ups." The silence that fell over the kitchen was deafening. This wasn't just about sex anymore. It wasn't about stretch marks or bruised egos. It was about theft. It was about the future of our children. Julian hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had been using Lauren as an ATM to finance his hidden life, stealing from a child in the process. I stood up from the bar stool, feeling a new volcanic surge of energy. "Robert," I said, leaning over the counter toward him. "Do you have a lawyer?" "I have a cousin who does divorces, but he's kind of a softie," he muttered. "We don't want a softie," I cut him off. "We want a shark. We want someone who smells blood in the water." Julian and Lauren didn't just break our hearts. They messed with our kids' money. And that, Robert, is unforgivable. I pulled out my phone and opened Google. I knew exactly who to call. There was a high-profile divorce attorney downtown, notorious for leaving cheating husbands completely destitute. On the local mom forums, they called her the Black Widow. "We're going to see her right now," I told Robert. "You have the bank statements proving the theft. I have the video of the humiliation and the audio of his confession. We are going for the jugular. The house, the cars, full custody, and every single cent Julian has stashed away. Are you with me?" Robert looked up. The agonizing grief in his eyes was finally giving way to something much harder: determination. He downed the rest of his coffee and stood up. "Let's go. That money is going back into my kid's account, even if I have to extract it from Julian's kidneys." We walked out the door together. We were no longer two sobbing victims. We were a legal demolition team. And Julian, who was probably sitting in some cheap motel thinking the worst was over, had absolutely no idea that the real hurricane was just making landfall. Helen Vance's law office wasn't in a cozy suburban strip mall. It was on the 40th floor of a sleek glass and steel high-rise downtown. When we stepped off the elevator, The aggressively cold AC hit us like a slap, drying the nervous sweat on Robert's forehead. A receptionist who looked like she was sculpted out of ice waved us right through without a smile. Attorney Helen Vance was waiting for us behind a massive mahogany desk. She was a woman in her late 50s with sharp, silver hair cut in a severe bob, wearing an impeccable pantsuit, and possessing eyes that looked like X-ray scanners. She didn't offer us water or coffee. She just pointed to the leather chairs. "I have 20 minutes," she said, tapping a gold Cartier watch on her wrist. "My retainer is high, and I don't bill by the hour to listen to you cry. I bill for results, so skip the emotional backstory and give me the facts. Who screwed who, and how much money is missing?" Robert and I exchanged a look. This woman was exactly what we needed. A predator who didn't get distracted by the blood. "My husband and his wife," I said, pointing to Robert. "I caught them in my master bathtub. I have an audio recording of him admitting to the affair and verbally abusing me, and a video of them being thrown out of my house naked in front of witnesses." Helen didn't blink. "Proof of adultery. Cute. Good for leverage in custody. But judges see that 10 times a day. What else? Where's the money?" Robert stepped up, tossing the thick manila envelope onto the mahogany desk with a loud smack. "My wife withdrew $5,000 from our daughter's college savings account 3 days ago. She wired it to her husband. I have the statements." For the first time, Helen Vance raised an eyebrow. She leaned forward and pulled the papers from the envelope, her eyes scanning the columns with predatory speed. "Ah," she murmured. "Now we're talking. Misappropriation of marital assets to finance an extramarital affair. And if the funds went into Julian's account to pay off illicit debts, we can argue that he is a co-conspirator in domestic financial fraud. That gives us grounds to file for an emergency freeze on all his assets." She looked up at us and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a shark smelling a drop of blood in the ocean. "Listen to me very carefully," Helen said, steepling her fingers. "Julian and Lauren think this is just domestic drama. They think there will be yelling, crying, and eventually a long, drawn-out mediation. They are wrong. We are dropping a nuclear bomb." She ticked things off on her fingers. "First, we file an emergency financial restraining order. We freeze all joint accounts today. If Julian tries to buy a pack of gum this afternoon, his debit card will decline. Second, we sue for civil damages and dissipation of marital assets. Third," she locked eyes with me, "Claire, you are filing for exclusive use and possession of the marital home, citing psychological abuse and an unstable environment for the minors due to the father's gambling." "Can I do that?" I asked, a sudden rush of vertigo hitting me at the sheer power of it. "With that audio of him degrading you and admitting to reckless behavior, I can get a judge to sign it before lunch. That audio is his coffin." Helen stood up. "Sign these retainers. Right now, my paralegals are drafting the notices to the banks and the courthouse. By the time Julian tries to buy dinner tonight, he will be financially homeless." We walked out of that high-rise feeling invincible. The fear was gone. We had a battle plan. Meanwhile, across town, justice was about to slam into Julian in the most humiliating way possible. Julian was standing in the lobby of a cheap Motel 6 just off the interstate. He had picked a budget spot to save cash, fully assuming that in a few days I would cool off, and he could waltz back into the house like the king of the castle. With his haphazardly packed suitcase resting against his leg, he shot a charming smile at the young girl working the front desk, trying to use the charisma that no longer worked. "1 single room, please. 3 nights, he said, pulling out his Gold Rewards credit card, the one he always bragged about to his golf buddies. The girl swiped the card. Waited. Frowned. "I'm sorry, sir. It says declined." Julian let out a nervous chuckle. "Impossible. Must be a chip error. Run it again." The girl tried again. Declined. "It says, contact card issuer. Court-ordered freeze." Julian's voice jumped an octave. "What are you talking about? Court order?" "Try a different card, sir," she suggested, eyeing the line of truckers forming behind him. Sweating bullets, Julian whipped out his bank debit card. Declined. He tried his backup credit card. Declined. Frantic, he checked his wallet for cash. He had $20. Not even enough for a sleeping bag. His iPhone buzzed in his pocket. It was an email alert. Not from me, but from a corporate law firm. Subject: Notice of filing for dissolution of marriage and emergency financial injunction. Julian read the subject line and felt the linoleum floor drop out from under his feet. Standing in that dingy motel lobby, With $20 to his name and a suitcase full of wrinkled clothes, he realized that Claire, his obedient, sagging wife, had just pushed the red button. With his cards frozen and humiliation burning his face, Julian practically ran out of the lobby, dragging his suitcase behind him. The receptionist didn't even look up as the automatic doors slid shut. He sat on a concrete bench in the parking lot, staring at his phone, which was hovering at 10% battery. He dialed Lauren's number. Once, twice, 3 times. Straight to voicemail. Of course. Arthur Brooks had her on lockdown like a grounded teenager. Desperation rapidly mutated into full-blown panic. He had no money, no home, and his accounts were locked. But then, a light bulb went off. The $5,000. Lauren had wired him the $5,000 3 days ago to pay off a shady sports betting bookie by tomorrow. That money wasn't sitting in his frozen bank account. He had withdrawn it in crisp $100 bills and stashed it in the glove compartment of his SUV for safekeeping. He sprinted to his car, yanked open the passenger door, and frantically popped the glove box. It was empty. A sheet of ice washed over his spine. Then, the memory hit him. Last night, before I came home early, Lauren had borrowed his keys to grab cigarettes from her car. She must have seen the envelope. She must have taken it back. Blind rage took over. This woman hadn't just cost him his marriage. Now she had stolen his only lifeline. Without a second thought, he cranked the engine and peeled out of the motel parking lot, speeding straight toward the Brooks residence. He didn't care about Arthur or his walking cane. He needed that cash. When he pulled up to their manicured suburban lawn, he saw the porch lights on. He marched up to the door and pounded on it without an ounce of politeness. "Lauren, get out here! I know you're in there!" he yelled. The door swung open, but it wasn't Lauren. It was Arthur Brooks. And this time, he didn't look like a sad old man. He looked like an active volcano. "You," the old man growled. "You have the sheer audacity to show your face at my house after what you did? Get off my property before I call the cops." "I'm not leaving without my money," Julian yelled, losing all sense of self-preservation. "Your daughter robbed me. Tell her to bring her ass out here and give me the envelope she took from my car." "What the hell are you talking about, you piece of trash?" Arthur asked, genuinely confused. "The $5,000. The cash she gave me. She took it back from my glove box," Julian insisted, completely oblivious to the fact that he was actively digging his own grave. Right then, Lauren appeared behind her father. Her eyes were swollen shut from crying, and she was wearing a faded bathrobe. When she saw Julian on the porch, a brief, pathetic spark of hope lit up her face. "Julian, did you come for me? Are we leaving together?" Julian glared at her. "Lauren, give me the damn envelope. I know you took it. My accounts are frozen because of your husband and Claire. I need that cash right now." Lauren's face crumbled. The last ember of hope turned to ash. "The money? You drove all the way here. Just for the money? You don't care how I am? You don't care that my parents look at me with absolute disgust?" "I don't give a damn," Julian snapped. "I have guys coming for that money tomorrow. Hand it over." Arthur, who had been listening silently, took a step forward. $5,000. Robert told me $5,000 was missing from my granddaughter's college fund. "Lauren, did you give this scumbag the baby's college money?" Lauren lowered her head, trembling violently. "Dad, he told me it was a crypto investment that was going to make us rich. It was to pay off a bookie, you idiot!" Julian screamed, totally unhinged, blurting out his final, ugliest secret. The silence that blanketed the porch was suffocating. Arthur looked at his daughter with a disappointment so vast it was physically painful to witness. Then, he turned to Julian. "So," the old man said, his voice shaking but lethal, "you're not just a cheating adulterer. You're a degenerate gambler, and you manipulated my foolish daughter into stealing from my granddaughter. That is my money now." "She gave it to me!" Julian lunged toward the doorway. "No," Lauren said, finally looking up. Her voice was weak, but there was a new emotion simmering in it. Pure hatred. She reached into the pocket of her bathrobe and pulled out the thick manila envelope of cash. Julian reached for it, but she stepped back. "I thought we loved each other, Julian. I thought we were going to build a life together. But you just wanted a walking ATM." Lauren looked at the envelope, then handed it to her father. "Dad, give this to Robert tomorrow. Tell him it's for the baby. Tell him I'm sorry. No! Julian howled, trying to shoulder his way through the doorframe. But Arthur was faster. He swung his heavy wooden cane like a baseball bat, catching Julian square in the chest and shoving him backward off the porch step. Get off my property! Arthur roared into the night. If you ever come within 100 yards of my daughter or my house again, I will shoot you myself. I don't care if I die in prison. Julian stumbled and fell onto the grass. He watched as Arthur gripped the envelope of cash. He watched as Lauren looked down at him one last time, not with love, but with absolute repulsion before slamming the heavy front door in his face. The loud click of the deadbolt locking was the final nail in his coffin. He was alone, sitting on a cold suburban lawn, completely broke, without a wife, without a mistress, and without a future. He dragged himself back to his SUV, the only piece of property he still had access to. He curled up in the back seat, and as the chill of the night seeped into his bones, Julian realized that hell wasn't a pit of fire. Hell was a freezing car parked on a dark street, knowing you had lost everything for absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, back at my house, my iPhone rang. It was Robert. Claire, he said, and his voice sounded incredibly light for the first time. My father-in-law just called. He got the money back. And I think Julian is going to have a very cold night. I smiled into the darkness of my living room. Justice had been served. But the final blow was still pending. The divorce and custody hearing. 3 weeks passed before I saw Julian face to face again. 3 weeks in which my life, though chaotic with legal paperwork, had found a peace I hadn't known in years. My kids and I had settled into a new routine. Without the suffocating tension of a miserable marriage hovering in the air, the house felt brighter, larger. The final mediation to sign the divorce settlement took place in the glass-walled conference room of Helen Vance's firm. I arrived early, wearing an impeccable navy blue pantsuit, my makeup flawless, my head held high. I sat next to my lawyer, who was organizing the files with surgical precision. When the door opened and Julian walked in, I barely recognized him. The man who had mocked my stretch marks from a bubble bath, the man who prided himself on his charm and virility, was gone. In his place was a ghost. He was wearing the exact same suit he had packed the day I kicked him out, but it hung loosely on his frame and had visible wrinkles. His face was gaunt, sporting a patchy beard, and his eyes were sunken from severe sleep deprivation. According to Robert, he had been living in his SUV and showering at a cheap Planet Fitness. He sat across from me, strictly avoiding eye contact. His attorney, a young guy who looked visibly intimidated by Helen Vance's reputation, cleared his throat nervously. All right, my lawyer started, skipping the pleasantries. We're here to sign. The terms remain non-negotiable. Claire retains exclusive use and possession of the marital home until the youngest child turns 18. The mother retains full physical custody, with supervised visitation for the father, pending a psychological and financial evaluation due to his documented gambling addiction. And, of course, the child support and alimony schedule. Julian looked up and I saw raw panic in his eyes. I can't pay that. His voice was a raspy croak. Claire, please. I'm bankrupt. I got fired. The rumors, the video clip, it made its way to HR. Nobody in this industry will hire me right now. I'm living in my Ford Explorer. How am I supposed to pay alimony? I felt a twinge in my chest. Not of pity, but of cold justice. You should have thought about that earlier, Julian, I responded calmly. Before you gambled away our savings. Before you stole from Robert's daughter. If you don't have money, you'll have to get 2 jobs. Or 3. I worked full-time. And Lauren? He asked bitterly, desperate to drag someone else down with him. She just gets off scotangent-free? Robert, who had attended as my moral support and character witness, spoke up from the corner of the room. Lauren didn't get off scotangent-free. Julian. Her parents shipped her off to live with her strict aunt out of state, miles away from anyone she knows. I sold our house. I'm moving with my daughter to a new school district to start over. Lauren lost everything. Her husband, her kid, her freedom. Just like you. Julian dropped his head in total defeat. He knew he was entirely alone. He stared at the thick stack of paper in front of him. It was his death warrant. If I sign this, will you let me see the kids? He whispered. If you comply with the court-ordered supervised visits, pay your child support on time, and stay far away from the sportsbooks. Yes, Helen Vance assured him coldly. But one single mistake, Julian. One late payment, and I will hit you with a wage garnishment order so fast it'll make your head spin." With a shaking hand, Julian picked up the heavy Mont Blanc pen. The sound of the ink scratching against the paper was the sweetest symphony I had heard in a decade. Scratch. 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 He signed his life away. He pushed the paper across the table to me. I signed with absolute firmness. Just Claire. No longer Julian's wife. Just Claire. The mother, the woman, the master of her own fate. When we walked out of the high-rise, the crisp city air hit my face. Julian had stayed behind in the conference room, his head buried in his hands, crying over the empire he had burned to the ground. Robert waited for me on the sidewalk. "You okay?" he asked. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with freedom. "Better than ever, Robert. How about you?" He smiled a sad but hopeful smile. "Getting my life back. My daughter is doing okay. And the money Arthur got back is safely tucked away in a trust for her. I guess the bad guys lost this time." We hugged. Not a romantic hug, but the fierce embrace of two survivors who had pulled each other out of the wreckage. He climbed into his F-150, and I walked to my SUV. I was going to pick up my kids from school. I was going to buy them chocolate ice cream. And tonight, for the very first time, the house would belong entirely to us. As I drove home, I couldn't help but look at my hands gripping the steering wheel. They were the same hands that had turned the deadbolt on that bathroom door. The same hands that had scrubbed the filth away with bleach. They were strong hands. And my body full of stretch marks and scars, was the body of a warrior who had just won the biggest battle of her life. It has been a year since that afternoon in the lawyer's office. A year since I signed for my freedom. Today, as I write these final words of my story, I am sitting on the back deck of my house, the same house Julian swore would fall apart without him, but which is now more solid and full of life than ever. I look out at the backyard and see Sophie and Matthew running through the sprinklers with a golden retriever mix we adopted a few months ago. They laugh until their stomachs hurt. They no longer ask why Daddy doesn't live here. With the simple wisdom of children, they understand that Dad is someone they see every other weekend at a supervised visitation center, but that peace, safety, and true unconditional love live right here with Mom. As for Julian, he is a shadow of his former self. He barely manages to scrape together the child support payments, working 2 dead-end retail jobs because no corporate firm will touch his resume. He rents a tiny, depressing 1-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town. He has aged a decade. The bitterness has carved deeper lines into his face than any wrinkle ever could. Sometimes, when he comes for his supervised visits, he looks at me. I can see the profound regret in his eyes. I see that he finally realizes what he threw away for a cheap thrill. He lost a woman who loved him fiercely, all for a plastic fantasy that evaporated the second the deadbolt clicked on that bathroom door. I haven't heard much about Lauren, only that she's still out of state, living quietly, branded forever as the neighborhood homewrecker. Robert and I are still good friends. Sometimes he brings his daughter over for Sunday barbecues. He is rebuilding his life, entirely focused on being a great dad. We are bonded by the mutual respect of having survived a shipwreck and swimming to the shore stronger than before. But my greatest victory wasn't keeping the house or seeing Julian financially ruined. My greatest victory was reclaiming myself. Yesterday, I bought a new swimsuit, a 2-piece bikini. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom, the afternoon sun highlighting my skin, and I looked at my stretch marks. They were still there, bright, silver, woven into my skin. But I no longer heard Julian's voice telling me they were disgusting. I heard my own voice. Those marks are the roadmap of my life. They are the undeniable proof that my body stretched to its absolute limits to bring 2 beautiful children into this world. They are my tiger stripes. Julian wanted plastic perfection, smooth skin with 0 history, and he ended up with absolutely nothing. I kept my imperfections, and with them, I built a home overflowing with laughter, dignity, and self-love. I learned the hard way that a woman's body is not a product for a man's consumption. It is a sacred temple that houses a soul, and if a man isn't capable of worshiping the scars on that temple, then he doesn't deserve to step foot inside it. To the woman reading this right now, I want to tell you something. If anyone has ever made you feel less than because of your body, your age, or your scars, Do not believe them. Real beauty isn't the absence of flaws. It's the fierce strength in the eyes of a woman who has lived, loved, and survived. Do not let anyone lock you in a bathtub of insecurities. You hold the key. You have always held the key. Lock the door on the people who don't value you, and open it wide to your own happiness. That was my true revenge. It wasn't just watching them be humiliated, although I'll admit, that felt pretty damn good. My real revenge was being wildly happy without them. It was proving that the woman with the stretch marks was infinitely stronger than the man with the lies. Thank you for joining me on this journey, for listening to my heartbreak and my victory. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel that karma really does exist, I ask for one small favor. Hit the like button on this video so it reaches more women who desperately need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because we will keep sharing real stories of strength, survival, and light. And before you go, leave a comment down below with the phrase, "My body is my temple." I want to read every single one of them. I want to know that I'm not alone, and I want you to know that you aren't either. I'm Claire, and this was my story. Until next time.